in 412 wedding photographs taken across 3 years at 11 different ceremonies by different photographers in different seasons of the year, there is a detail nobody noticed until that Saturday in October. A small detail, almost invisible, but once you see it, you cannot stop seeing it. In every one of those photographs, always in the background, always silent, always looking straight into the camera, there sits the same orange cat. The same orange cat, the same white teardrop on his chest, the same ear folded slightly at the tip, the same impeccable posture of someone who knows exactly what he is doing. And the most unsettling detail of all, that cat had been buried in 2019. Eleanor Whitaker discovered it by accident, and when she pulled at that loose thread, with no idea what she was about to unravel, the small town of Maple Hollow found itself face to face with a mystery that involved a wedding from the 1980s, a widow keeping a forgotten album, a grandson who came home without quite knowing why, and a cat who seemed to have crossed time itself just to keep doing what he loved most in the world. But to understand how all of this came together and why this story would end up changing the lives of every person inside it, we have to go back exactly 7 months. To the moment when Eleanor was alone in her studio on an ordinary Saturday, editing the photos of one more ordinary wedding, with no idea that this would be the last time in her life that anything would feel ordinary again. Saturday, March 14th, the Hartwell wedding edit. The studio sat above the old hardware store on Main Street, 2 flights up a narrow wooden staircase that smelled of varnish even in winter. Eleanor had taken the lease 8 years ago for the light. The east window pulled in 3 good hours of morning gold, and the west window held the afternoon. She edited by the west window because afternoon light was forgiving, and forgiving was what most of her clients needed. Every bride looked better at 4:15 than she did at noon. Eleanor had built a small business on understanding that. She was 34 years old. She had been photographing weddings in Maple Hollow and the 3 towns adjacent for 8 of those years. The town had 4,000 people in it, give or take a college student gone for the semester, and the social calendar moved on a slow, predictable orbit. June and September were the busy months, with smaller surges in October and February. She had photographed roughly 50 weddings a year for 8 years. She had a hard drive in the studio closet labeled simply Archive that held over 400 ceremonies organized by year and surname. It was the kind of professional life people in cities did not entirely believe in. Eleanor liked it. She liked knowing the same flower shop, the same caterer, the same minister at the White Methodist Church on Cherry Street. She liked the way the same people kept showing up, first as guests, then as engaged couples, then as parents at their cousin's reception. The town wove itself, slowly, through her viewfinder. She had grown up here. Her mother still lived 3 blocks away, in the house Eleanor had been raised in. Her father had passed 11 years ago. Eleanor had moved away once, briefly, to study photography in Boston. She had come home after 2 years, for reasons she did not fully understand at the time, and now did not feel the need to defend. Some people fit into the places they leave. Some people fit into the places they return to. She had been the second kind. She did not have a husband, which a few aunts found puzzling, and a cat, a long-haired calico named Penny, which her mother considered a step in the right direction. This is who she was. At 34, on the Saturday afternoon, she opened the Hartwell folder and saw the cat for the first time without seeing him. The Hartwell wedding had been unremarkable, which Eleanor meant as a compliment. Late winter ceremony at the Maple Hollow Barn, the restored 1890 structure on the south edge of town, oak beams and lime-wash walls, and a cathedral ceiling lit by 16 iron chandeliers that the volunteer fire department had to dust every March. A bride in cream wool, a groom from out of town, 82 guests. Vows that lasted 11 minutes and made the bride's grandmother cry exactly once. She started with the ceremony folder. She always did. She liked to set the emotional spine of the story first and then build the celebration around it. Photo number 47 was the ring exchange, the bride's hand resting on the groom's, the minister's open book in soft focus behind them. Eleanor zoomed in to check the focus on the rings, which was sharp, then zoomed back out to look at the composition as a whole. She was about to mark it as a portfolio candidate when she stopped. She moved her cursor to the back of the frame. Behind the couple, behind the minister, behind the front row of guests, turned slightly toward the altar, there was a wooden chair against the back wall of the barn. A folding chair, oak-stained, the kind the venue stacked in the side corridor and brought out for overflow seating. On the chair sat a cat, a small orange cat with a white mark on his chest, sitting upright, front paws together, tail curled neatly around them, looking directly into the camera. Eleanor laughed, soft and surprised, the way you laugh when something charming arrives uninvited. She zoomed in. The focus held. He was not in the depth of field plane of the rings, but he was sharp enough that you could see the slight fold at the tip of his left ear, an old crease, the kind cats develop and never lose. His amber eyes were direct, passionate, unblurred. She made a note in the metadata. Wedding crasher, back row, very photogenic. She marked it as a potential bonus shot for the couple. She moved on. She did not zoom in again. She did not yet know that she should. Before we continue, I want to take a moment to talk to you. These stories exist because of this community, because of you. And right now, YouTube has denied our monetization, which means the only thing keeping Paws and Whispers alive is the love you have for these stories. If our videos have ever made you feel something, if they've brought you comfort, joy, or just a moment of peace, consider making a small donation. Even the minimum makes a huge difference to us. The link is pinned in the comments below. Thank you for being here. Tuesday, March 17th, the Chen wedding folder. The Chen wedding was scheduled to deliver the following Friday. Eleanor opened the folder Tuesday morning with her second cup of coffee, and she worked through the first 120 photos with the steady, narrow attention of someone who has done this exact thing thousands of times. The cat was in photo 83. She did not see him at first. She saw him on the second pass when she was checking the lighting balance across a wide shot of the reception hall. Chen wedding, October the previous year, autumn ceremony at the Maple Hollow barn, 211 guests, ivory and burgundy palette, an evening reception lit by string lights and 300 candles in glass jars. He was on the catering counter at the back of the room, half hidden behind a dessert tray, front paws together, tail curled, looking directly into the camera. White teardrop on his chest, folded ear, same cat. Eleanor stopped scrolling. She sat back in her chair. She drank from her coffee. The coffee was lukewarm. The studio was quiet in the particular way studios are quiet on Tuesday mornings before the businesses below opened, when the only sound was the radiator clanking once in the corner, the way it did when the sun first hit the building's south face and the metal began to expand. She told herself, same town, same venue, of course. There was probably a barn cat. Lots of restored barns had a barn cat. Someone fed him. He wandered through events. The fact that he had landed in 2 photographs across 2 different weddings was not unusual. It was actually a little funny, a small recurring character in the town's wedding archive. She made a second note in the metadata. Same cat as Hartwell, same venue, could be a regular. She kept working. She finished the Chen folder by lunch. She did not open the archive drive. She did not yet think to. Wednesday, March 18th, mid-morning, she had a senior portrait session at 1 o'clock and a phone call with a June bride at 3. The morning was free. Eleanor told herself she would catch up on email. She made a third coffee. She sat at her desk and opened her email client, and then, without quite deciding to, she closed it and opened the archive drive instead. The drive was organized by year. Inside each year by month, inside each month by client surname. She opened 2024. She scrolled to October. She opened the Chen folder, which she had just edited the day before, and she pulled up photo 83 on the left half of her screen. Then she opened the Bartlett folder, June 2024. She had photographed the Bartlett wedding 9 months ago, summer ceremony at the Maple Hollow barn, an outdoor cocktail hour beforehand on the lawn. She started scrolling. Photo 214. The orange cat was sitting on the stone wall at the edge of the lawn, behind the bride and her father walking back from the photo session. Front paws together, tail curled, looking directly into the camera. Eleanor stood up. She walked to the kitchenette in the corner of the studio. She poured the coffee she had just poured down the sink, which was a thing she did when her hands needed something to do that her brain had not yet authorized. She filled the kettle. She did not turn it on. She walked back to her desk. She opened the Pearson folder, September 2023. The cat was on the railing of the upper hayloft, looking down on the dance floor. Same posture, same direct stare. She opened the Knowles folder, May 2023. The cat was sitting on a stack of folded chairs in the side corridor as the bride walked to the altar. Same posture, same direct stare. She opened the Vega folder, August 2022. The cat was on the windowsill of the bridal suite, framed in the open window behind the bride as she fixed her veil. Same posture, same direct stare. Eleanor sat very still. She had now found him in 5 weddings. 5 different photographers. She had shot some, but the venue rotated photographers, and she had pulled the Vega folder from a colleague's shared archive when they had collaborated that summer. 5 different photographers. 5 different seasons, 5 different lenses, 5 different lighting setups, 5 different angles. The same cat, sitting in the same posture, looking directly into the camera. She told herself again that he was a barn cat. She held on to this idea with both hands. Wednesday afternoon, around 2, Penny the calico jumped onto the desk and walked across the keyboard. Eleanor lifted her gently to the floor without taking her eyes off the screen. Penny gave her the slow, withering look of a cat who has been disrespected and went to nap on the radiator. Eleanor opened a new spreadsheet. She listed every wedding she had photographed at the Maple Hollow barn in the last 3 years. She listed the ones she could remember her colleagues photographing there. She started with 16. She knew there were more. She added them as she remembered them. The Lockwood wedding in February, the Tanmarsh wedding the previous April, the Doherty renewal of vows last August. By 2:30, she had 23 weddings on the list. She started opening folders. She did not eat lunch. She did not call back the senior portrait at 1 o'clock. She had to text and reschedule, citing a family emergency, which was not exactly accurate, but was not exactly a lie either, because what was happening in the studio felt familial in a way she could not have explained. By 4 in the afternoon, she had checked 9 wedding folders. The cat appeared in 7 of them. He was always in the background. He was always sitting upright, paws together, tail curled. He was always, and this was the part she kept circling back to, looking directly into the camera, even when the photographer was on the opposite side of the room, even when the photographer was a different person, even when no human could have seen him, even when his line of sight to the lens passed through the bride's veil, or a server's elbow, or the open mouth of a singing groomsman. 5 photographers, 3 years, 11 ceremonies by the time she finished the count at 6:45 that night. The same cat. She closed the laptop. She drove home. She did not tell anyone yet. She did not have language for it. Wednesday night, she lived in a small 1-story house on Acorn Street, a mile from her mother's place, with a fenced backyard and a screened-in porch where Penny sat in fair weather and watched the chickadees in the neighbor's feeder. Eleanor came home after 7, unwrapped a sandwich she did not really want, ate 2 bites, and sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open in front of her. She told herself she would not open the archive again that night. She opened it at 8:15. She opened folders at random now, no longer working through the list. She wanted to know if he was elsewhere, in weddings she had not yet thought of. He was. The Halbrook engagement shoot, summer 2022, sitting on a fence post behind the couple. The Renner wedding, January 2023, indoor ceremony in the side chapel of the Methodist Church, sitting on the pew at the back, behind the last row of guests. Wait, not the barn? Eleanor went still. The Renner wedding had been at the Methodist Church. Not the barn, not the same venue. The orange cat was in the Renner photographs, sitting calmly on a pew, looking directly into her lens, and the Methodist Church was on Cherry Street, 8 blocks from the barn, and the side door to the sanctuary required a key. He was not the barn cat. She closed the laptop. She went to bed. She did not sleep until close to 2 in the morning, and when she did sleep, she dreamed of nothing, which she registered as a kindness. Busy ways. Thursday morning. Maple Hollow Animal Hospital. There was one veterinary clinic in town run by Dr. Nora Emmerich, a woman in her early 60s who had taken over the practice from her own father in the late 1990s. Nora was the kind of person who knew the medical history of half the animals in 3 counties without consulting a computer. Eleanor's mother had taken Penny there since she was a kitten. Eleanor had been bringing her own pets to Nora for 15 years. Eleanor had printed 3 of the photographs on the studio's good photo paper. She drove them to the clinic at 9:15, the time she knew was between Nora's morning appointments. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and cedar shavings, and faintly of the lavender hand soap Nora kept in a pump bottle on the front desk. Marjorie, the receptionist, looked up from her crossword. "Eleanor, Penny okay?" "Penny's fine. I wanted to ask Nora something, if she has a minute." Marjorie nodded toward the back. Nora was in the small office behind the exam rooms, drinking tea from a chipped mug that read, "World's Second Best Aunt." She had the wire-rimmed reading glasses on the end of her nose and a chart open in front of her. She looked up when Eleanor knocked. "Sit down. You look like a person with a question." Eleanor sat. She put the 3 photographs on the desk between them. Nora looked at the first one, the Hartwell wedding. The orange cat on the folding chair. She did not pick it up. She did not move. She looked at the photograph for what Eleanor would later remember as a long time, long enough that the radiator in the corner cycled on and then off again. Then she pulled her glasses off slowly and set them down on the desk, and she did not look at Eleanor when she finally spoke. "Where did you get this?" "I took it 3 weeks ago." Nora picked up the photograph then. She brought it close to her face. She studied the chest, the ear, the eyes. "3 weeks ago," she said. "Yes, the Hartwell wedding." "The barn." Nora set the photograph back down on the desk. She looked at Eleanor over the rim of her tea mug, which she had picked up but not sipped from. "Eleanor," she said, "that's Birdie." Eleanor waited. "Birdie Hallerin's cat," Nora said. "Marigold. He belonged to Birdie Hallerin for 16 years. "Okay. Birdie is 91 years old. She lives in the grey house on Linden, the one with the stone wall. Her cat died in the spring of 2019. Nora set the mug down. She slid the photograph back toward Eleanor with one finger, the way you slide a delicate thing. "I put him down myself, Eleanor. Renal failure. He was in my office. Birdie was holding him. I signed the paperwork. He is buried under the lilac tree in her backyard." Eleanor did not move. "That's the cat," Nora said. "That's Marigold, the teardrop on the chest, the folded ear. He tore it on a fence in 2014. I sutured it myself. That's the scar tissue. That's not a cat that looks like Marigold. That's Marigold." The clinic radiator clicked on. "How sure are you?" Eleanor said. Her voice came out flatter than she meant it to. "I have known that cat for 16 years. Thursday, 10:20 in the morning." Eleanor sat in her car in the clinic parking lot for 15 minutes before she started the engine. The morning was cool, late March in northern New England, the snow gone from everywhere except the deep north-facing corners of yards, the maples just beginning to swell at the buds, the sky a high, pale blue that promised nothing in particular. The air smelled of wet earth and the faint sweetness of something thawing. She was a person who did not believe in things. She was a person who had built her professional life on the premise that what the camera captured was simply what was in the room. That photography was, at its heart, the documentation of available light hitting available surfaces. That the camera did not lie because the camera could not. It did not have the imagination required to lie. She was sitting in her car at 10:20 in the morning, holding a photograph of a cat that had been dead for almost 6 years. She did not drive to the studio. She drove to Linden Street, Thursday, just before 11. The grey house with the stone wall was the third on the left. It was a Greek Revival farmhouse from sometime in the 1840s, white-trimmed, with a wraparound porch and a cedar shingle roof that had been replaced about a decade ago and was beginning to weather to silver. The front yard had 2 old maples in it, their branches still bare. The stone wall was hand-laid, the kind that locals said had been built by farmers with horses and rope before there were any property lines to enforce. Eleanor parked at the curb. She sat in the car for another moment. Then she got out. She walked up the brick path to the porch. She rang the bell. From somewhere inside, a small dog barked twice and went quiet, the way dogs do when their owners say their name. The door opened. The woman who stood on the other side of the screen was small, maybe 5'1". Her white hair was pinned up in a soft bun, the way a generation of women had worn their hair without ever calling it a style. She was wearing a cardigan the color of dry oatmeal and corduroy slacks. Her eyes were sharp in a face that had become very small with age. "Yes, dear?" she said. "Mrs. Howerin, I'm Eleanor Whitaker. I'm a photographer. I work in town." "I know who you are," Birdie Howerin said, with the matter-of-factness of someone who had known Eleanor's mother for 50 years and Eleanor since she was 6. "Whitaker, your father was frank. He fixed my furnace in 1991 and never charged me, the rascal." "Come in." Eleanor came in. The house smelled of cedar and old paper and a faint trace of a perfume that was no longer manufactured. The front parlor had a marble fireplace, 3 lace doilies, and a wing-back chair facing a low table on which sat a half-finished crossword and a pair of reading glasses. The little dog, a brown terrier mix, white around the muzzle, came to sniff Eleanor's shoes and decided she was acceptable. Birdie sat in the wing-back. She gestured to the love seat. "I haven't had a young person in this room in 9 months, she said. "Sit, sit. Did you want tea?" "I can get tea." "I don't need tea, thank you." "Then what is it you came for?" "You didn't come about a furnace." Eleanor opened her bag. She took out the 3 photographs. She set them on the low table. Birdie picked up her reading glasses. She put them on. She looked at the photographs. She did not speak. She picked up the first one, the Hartwell wedding, the cat on the folding chair, with both hands, the way you pick up a letter you have been waiting on for a long time. She held it close. She moved it under the lamplight so the surface caught. Eleanor watched her face. Birdie's expression did not change in any of the ways Eleanor had expected. It did not collapse into grief. It did not stiffen into denial. It went, instead, to a kind of slow, gathered attention, as though she were listening for a familiar voice in a noisy room, and finding it. "That's Marigold," Birdie said. "Yes." "This was taken 3 weeks ago." "Yes." Birdie set the photograph down. She picked up the second one, then the third. She looked at each of them for the same long time. The little dog lay down on her foot and went to sleep. Then Birdie set the third photograph down and folded her hands in her lap and looked at Eleanor over the tops of her reading glasses. "Well," she said, "I wondered when somebody would notice." Eleanor had prepared herself for several reactions. She had not prepared herself for that one. "You wondered," she said. "I see him sometimes," Birdie said. She said it without drama, the way you mentioned that the mail came late. "In the yard, on the back porch, once, last winter, on the stair. I thought it was my eyes. My eyes are not what they used to be. I told myself I missed him so much I was making things up." She gestured at the photographs. "But the camera doesn't miss anybody." "So, Mrs. Howerin, Birdie, he's in 11 photographs, across 3 years, at weddings, different photographers, different venues even. One of them is at the Methodist church." Birdie nodded slowly. "The Renner wedding," she said. Eleanor stopped. "How did you know that?" "My great-niece was there. She showed me a photograph at Christmas of the bride. She said, 'Aunt Birdie, isn't that funny? There's a cat on the back pew.'" Birdie smiled very faintly. "I told her I thought it was very funny indeed." The radiator under the parlor window clicked twice. Outside, a car passed slowly on Linden Street. The little dog snored. "Birdie," Eleanor said slowly, "I don't know what I'm asking, but I drove here because I didn't know where else to go. Nora recognized him. She said she put him down herself in 2019. She did. And he's buried in your backyard. Under the lilac." "Yes." "So how—" Birdie raised one small hand. "Oh dear, I don't know how. I'm 91 years old, and I have stopped explaining things that don't need explaining to me. I knew that cat for 16 years. He came to me in 1998 when I was 64, in a way I never quite worked out, and he stayed. He had a particular love. Do you know what it was?" "What?" "Weddings." She said it as though stating that he had liked tuna. "My niece got married at the barn in 2003. He was at her wedding, sat on the back of a chair the whole reception. My nephew got married at the Methodist church in 2007. He somehow ended up there. I never figured out how. I thought I had left him at home. He was on the back pew. I'd see him later in the photographs. My friend Coralie's daughter got married at the lake house in 2011. He showed up. Coralie said she'd never seen anything like it. Every wedding I went to for 16 years, every single one, he found his way there. She tilted her head. He didn't beg. He didn't make a scene. He just sat. He liked the music. He liked the light. He liked watching people promise things to each other. I used to joke he was the family wedding correspondent. She looked back at the photographs on the table, and after he died, I stopped going to weddings. I'm too old for them anyway. The last one I went to was Coralie's grandson in spring of 2019, 6 weeks before Marigold went. After that, I gave my regrets. She picked up the Hartwell photograph again. But it seems, she said, with the closest thing to wonder her voice could produce, that he kept going. Eleanor stayed for an hour and a half. She had not meant to. She had meant to ask her questions and leave. But Birdie Howerin had asked her gently if she would mind staying for tea after all, and Eleanor had heard herself say yes, and the tea had turned into a slice of pound cake, and the pound cake had turned into Birdie, pulling out a green leather album from the bottom shelf of the bookcase by the fireplace, and the album had turned into Eleanor sitting on the love seat with the album open across her knees, looking at 60 years of weddings. The album was thick. The pages were black. The photographs were attached with little corner mounts, the way albums had been made before adhesive backings. The earliest photographs were black and white. The latest were color. On the third page, there was a wedding from August 1965. A young couple on the steps of the Methodist church, the bride in a tea-length dress, the groom in a thin black tie. Birdie was in the second row of the wedding party, 26 years old, a bridesmaid, holding a bouquet of something white. Eleanor turned the page. Wedding from May 1968. Birdie was the bride. Her husband, Henry, she said, his name had been Henry, he had passed in 1992, stood beside her on the porch of this very house. They had been married 34 years. There was no cat in 1968. There was no cat in 1972. There was no cat in 1981. There was no cat in 1995. Then the page turned to August 1999, Birdie's grandniece's first wedding. Outdoors, in a field, a small ceremony. In the back of the photograph, on a fence post, sitting upright, paws together, tail curled, looking directly into the camera, was an orange cat with a white teardrop on his chest. There he is, Birdie said softly. First one I have of him. Eleanor looked at the photograph for a long moment. He'd been with you a year by then, she said. A year and 3 months. He was already very good at it. Eleanor turned the pages. He was in the 2003 wedding at the barn. He was in the 2007 wedding at the church. He was in the 2011 wedding at the lake house. He was in 8 weddings across the album's last 20 years, in ceremonies Eleanor had not even thought to look for, ceremonies from before her career began, in photographs taken on film cameras by uncles and cousins and family friends. The same cat, the same posture, the same direct stare. She closed the album at the last page she had reached and looked at Birdie, who was watching her with the patient attention of someone who had been waiting decades for this conversation to happen. Birdie, Eleanor said, would it be all right with you if I told a few people about this? Which people? I'm not sure yet. The town, I think, eventually. Maybe a small post first, on the community page, just to see if anybody else noticed him. Birdie looked down at the photographs on the table. He was a private cat in his way, she said. But he loved being seen at weddings. I don't think he'd mind. She looked up. Tell them, she said. Tell them, but tell them gently. Some people in this town are going to need to sit down before they understand what they're looking at. Friday, March 24th. The studio, 8 in the morning. Eleanor had not slept much. She had spent the evening at her kitchen table with the photographs spread across it like tarot cards, and Penny had walked across them twice in protest at being ignored, and at midnight Eleanor had moved them to the spare bedroom and closed the door so she could go to bed without seeing them. She had drafted the post in her head 3 times. She wrote it for real on Friday morning, sitting at her studio desk with the east window, pulling in the first light of the day. She did not use words like miracle or ghost or impossible. She had decided, sometime in the small hours, that this story did not need to be sold. It needed to be set down gently on a table and let the town walk around it. She wrote, "To anyone in Maple Hollow who has been married at the barn, the Methodist church, the lake house, or anywhere else in town in the last 25 years, I am asking a favor. Please look at your wedding photographs again. Look in the background. Look at the chairs against the back wall, the fence posts at the edge of the lawn, the window sills, the corners of the room. If you find a small orange cat with a white mark on his chest, sitting upright and looking directly at the camera, please send me a copy of the photograph. There is something happening in this town that I do not entirely understand, and I would like to understand it with you." She attached 3 photographs: the Hartwell, the Chen, the Knowles. She posted it to the Maple Hollow community page at 8:43 in the morning. Then she made coffee and stood at the west window and waited. The first message came in at 9:11. It was from Marjorie, the receptionist at the vet clinic. Her own daughter had been married at the barn in 2017. Marjorie had attached a photograph from the reception. The cat was on a high shelf above the bar, looking directly at the camera. The second message came in at 9:24, the third at 9:31. By noon, Eleanor had 38 messages. By the end of the day, she had 104. By Sunday night, the orange cat had been identified in the wedding photographs of 147 people. Some of them lived in town. Some had moved away years ago and still followed the community page. Some had been alerted by their grown children who had seen the post and gone digging through their parents' albums. The earliest photograph anyone sent her was from a wedding in August of 1999. The most recent was the Hartwell wedding 3 weeks ago. In every single one of them, every single one, the orange cat sat upright, paws together, tail curled, looking directly into the camera. Tuesday, March 25th, a reporter from the County Weekly called. Eleanor declined the interview. She said the story was not hers to tell. She said it was Birdie's, and she had not asked Birdie's permission for that particular kind of attention. She drove to Linden Street that afternoon to ask. Birdie was in the kitchen, making bread. Her hands moved through the dough the way the hands of women who have made bread for 60 years move through dough, without consulting the brain, without looking at the timer, with the slow, patient confidence of a thing the body has remembered. The kitchen smelled of yeast and butter and the wood of the old kneading board. Eleanor sat at the kitchen table. "A reporter called," she said, "from the County Sentinel. I told her no for now, but I wanted to ask you." Birdie folded the dough over once. Then again, "What does the reporter want?" "To write about Marigold. About the photographs. You are surety, but in so." Birdie was quiet for a long moment. She turned the dough into the bowl, covered it with a tea towel, and set it on the counter near the radiator. Then she sat down across from Eleanor and brushed a streak of flour from her cheek. "Eleanor," she said, "may I tell you something?" "Of course." "I have lived in this town for 91 years. I have buried a husband, a sister, 3 friends I loved more than my sister, and a cat I loved more than at least one of those friends. I have watched this town shrink and grow and shrink again, and I have watched young people leave it for places they thought would be more interesting and come back to it later because interesting turned out not to be the same thing as good." She folded her hands on the table. "I have not had a great deal of attention in my life. I was not the kind of woman who wanted attention. But I have a grandson, my only one, my Henry's namesake. Henry came back from the Pacific in 1946 with a slight limp and a taste for very strong coffee, and our son Daniel was born 2 years later, and Daniel had 1 boy, and that boy is named Henry too, and I have not seen him in 7 years. Eleanor was very still. He lives in Phoenix. He works in computers. I never quite understood what kind. He came home for Daniel's funeral in 2016, and he came home for 1 Thanksgiving after that, and then his life took him further away, and I am not the kind of woman who calls and asks people to come back. I sent cards. I sent a card on every birthday and every Christmas. He sent cards back sometimes." She looked toward the window. "What I'm telling you is, if a reporter writes about an orange cat in this town, my Henry will see it. He has a, what is it called, a thing on his phone, a feed. He grew up here. He gets the news from here, even from Arizona. He knew Marigold." Her hands moved on the table just once, a small adjustment. Marigold was sleeping on his bed when he was 17 years old, and his father told him he could not study music in college because there was no money. Marigold was on his bed for that whole conversation. He has not forgotten that cat. She looked back at Eleanor. "Tell the reporter yes," Birdie said. "Tell them whatever you like. But tell them my address." Friday, March 28th. The Sentinel article. The piece ran on the front page of the local section. The headline was simple and straight: "A cat nobody can explain." The reporter had done her work. She had interviewed Eleanor. She had interviewed Nora Emmerich, who had repeated on the record that she had euthanized the cat in question in May of 2019 and signed the paperwork herself. She had interviewed 3 of the brides, whose photographs included Marigold. She had spoken to Birdie at her kitchen table for an hour and a half, and the story she filed had Birdie's voice in it, direct, unpretentious, without sentimentality. The story ended with 2 sentences from Birdie. "I don't expect anyone to believe what they don't have room to believe. I just hope the people who loved that cat, the ones who don't know yet that they did, get a chance to see him." The article went up on the Sentinel's website Friday at 6 in the morning. By Friday evening, it had been shared 4,000 times. By Saturday afternoon, a regional television station in Burlington had called. Eleanor declined to be on camera. Birdie said yes. Sunday, March 30th. The phone call. Birdie called Eleanor at 8:15 in the morning. Eleanor was still in her bathrobe, drinking coffee at her kitchen counter, and she answered on the second ring because she had been half expecting it. "Eleanor." He called. "Henry?" He saw the article. He saw the photographs. He cried on the phone, "Eleanor. My grandson cried on the phone with me. He is flying in Tuesday." Tuesday, April 1st. Burlington Airport. Birdie did not drive anymore. Her great-niece would normally have picked Henry up, but Birdie's great-niece had a meeting that could not be moved, and so Eleanor, who had not really been asked, who had simply offered without quite deciding to, drove the hour to the airport with Birdie in the passenger seat in her good wool coat and her best leather gloves and the small handbag she had carried to every important occasion of her life since 1971. The drive was quiet. Birdie watched the spring fields go by, the snow gone now from everywhere except the deep north slopes, the maples just beginning to flush red at the buds, the sky a soft, watered blue. Eleanor did not push at the silence. There was a particular kind of waiting Birdie was doing in the seat beside her, and it did not need company. At the airport, Eleanor parked in short term, and they walked into the terminal and stood by the arrivals door at Gate B. The flight came in 20 minutes late. Henry Howerin came through the doors in a charcoal jacket with a duffel bag over one shoulder. He was 41 years old. He had his grandfather's height and his grandmother's small, alert eyes. He saw Birdie from 20 feet away, and his face did the thing faces do when they were not expecting to feel what they are about to feel, a sudden softening, an unguarding. He set the duffel bag down on the floor at the gate. He walked the last 20 feet to his grandmother, and he put his arms around her, and Birdie, who came up to the middle of his chest, stood very still and put one small hand on the back of his head and kept it there. Eleanor looked away. When she looked back, Henry was wiping his face with the back of his hand, and Birdie was patting his shoulder with the brisk affection of a woman who had already had her cry in private at 5 in the morning and was not going to do it again in an airport. "You came," she said. "I came, Gram. Eleanor drove me. This is Eleanor Whitaker. She's the photographer, the one who started all this." Henry turned to Eleanor and offered his hand. His grip was warm. His eyes were red. "Thank you," he said. For whatever this is. Thank you." Wednesday, April 3rd. Birdie's house. The first afternoon Henry was home, Eleanor stopped by with a printed set of all 147 photographs of the cat she had now collected, sorted by date. She had told herself she would drop them off and leave. Henry was tired from travel. The grandmother and grandson needed time alone. She rang the bell. Henry opened the door. Behind him, in the front parlour, Birdie was sitting in her wing-back chair with her reading glasses on. The little terrier was on her foot. The afternoon light was coming through the front window in the soft, low way it came in through that window in early April, and there was a cup of tea on the low table, and the room smelled of the cedar and old paper and the perfume that did not exist anymore. And on the back of the wingback chair, just behind Birdie's left shoulder, sitting upright, paws together, tail curled, Akainai, was an orange cat, a small orange cat, with a white teardrop on his chest, with a folded ear at the tip of his left ear. Looking directly at Eleanor, she did not move. Henry, who had been about to invite her in, followed her gaze. He turned his head. He saw the cat. He went very still. "Graham," he said softly. Birdie did not look up from her crossword. "I see him, dear," she said. "He's been here since you walked through the door." Eleanor stood in the doorway with the envelope of photographs in her hand. The cat looked at her with the patient amber attention of something that had been waiting a long time for her to be in this room. He did not move. She thought distantly that she should be afraid. She was not afraid. She felt, instead, the way she had felt on certain mornings in church as a child, before she had decided what she did and did not believe, the particular silence of a room that had stopped being only physical. The cat blinked once, slowly. Then he looked at Birdie. Then he looked at Henry. Henry had not moved either. His eyes were wet again. "Hi, Buddy," he said quietly. The cat curled his tail more tightly around his paws. Then, with the unhurried grace of a creature that had performed this exact motion 1,000 times, he stood up on the back of the chair, stepped down onto the cushioned arm, walked across the seat between Birdie's leg and the chair's other arm, and settled himself in her lap. He laid his head down on her wrist. He closed his eyes. Birdie did not move her hand. She kept her finger on the line of the crossword where she had been reading. She did not look down. "Eleanor, dear," she said. "Come in. Close the door. There's pound cake in the kitchen." Eleanor closed the door. Too." Wednesday afternoon, 4 o'clock. They sat in the parlor for a long time. Henry told them about Phoenix, about his work, which involved data systems for hospitals and which he could not entirely explain, and about which Birdie said, "I don't need to understand it, dear. I just need to know you like it." And Henry said he did, mostly, and then said, after a pause, that he had been thinking lately that he did not need to be in Phoenix to do it. Birdie did not look up from where her hand rested on the cat's small back. "There are no maple trees in Phoenix," she said. "No, Graham, there are not. Just a thought." "It's been a thought of mine, too." Eleanor sat on the love seat with her cup of tea and did not interrupt. The cat did not move from Birdie's lap. He was solid. He was warm. Eleanor could see the slight rise and fall of his ribs as he breathed. He was, for all the world, an ordinary cat doing what ordinary cats did, which was sleep on the lap of someone who had loved him. But he was not ordinary. They all knew this, and none of them said it. After a while, Henry asked Birdie if she still kept the album from the bottom shelf. Birdie said yes. Henry got up and brought it over, and the two of them looked at the photographs of weddings together, 60 years of weddings, in this town, in this house, with this woman in them in different decades and different dresses, and the same alert small eyes. Henry stopped at a page from 2002. "That's Mom and Dad's anniversary party." "Yes." "He's there." "Yes." On the back of the couch, Birdie nodded. She did not look at the photograph. She was looking at the cat in her lap. "He was at everything that mattered, dear." Friday, April 4. Henry did not fly back on Friday, the way his return ticket said he would. He called the airline, and he changed it. He stayed 11 days. He did not announce that he was thinking about moving home. He did not need to. He went to the Methodist church on Sunday with Birdie, the way he had gone with her as a boy. He walked through the town on weekday mornings and ran into people who had known his father, who held his hand a moment longer than necessary when they shook it. He stopped by Eleanor's studio twice, once to drop off a tin of his grandmother's lemon cookies, and once because he had been thinking about something and did not have anyone to think about it with. He sat on the chair across from Eleanor's desk with the cookies between them, and he said slowly that he had not understood for years why his life in Phoenix had felt like a coat that did not quite fit. He said he understood now. He said, "You can have the life you chose, and you can also have the one you came from, and they don't always have to be the same one." And for a long time, I forgot that. Eleanor did not say much. She made him a fresh coffee. She let him talk. When he left, she sat at her desk for a long time, looking at the photograph she had pinned to her bulletin board, the Hartwell wedding, the orange cat on the folding chair, the ring exchange in the foreground. She thought, this is how a story moves, not because of the cat, Because of what the cat made people willing to look at. ESOO. Saturday, April 12th. Late morning. Eleanor was at the studio. She had a wedding scheduled for the following Saturday, the Doyle wedding, an early spring ceremony at the barn, and she was doing her usual pre-shoot review, floor plan, light schedule, family list. She had not heard from Birdie in 2 days, which was not unusual, and she was not worried. The phone rang at 11:20. It was Henry. Eleanor, she had a fall this morning. She's all right, I want to say that first. She got up too quickly from the chair. She bruised her hip. She's at the clinic. They're keeping her for observation through tonight. Oh, Henry, she wanted me to call you. She said something I want to tell you in person. Can you come by the house tonight, after they release her? Saturday, April 12th, 6 in the evening. Eleanor parked at the curb on Linden Street. The lilac tree in the side yard was just beginning to bud. The light was the particular long gold of early April evening, when the sun hung low over the western ridge and the air had the faint sweetness of wet earth and the season's first crocus, and the maples on the lawn had begun to push out the smallest red leaves at the tips of their branches. Henry opened the door. She's in the parlor. She's tired, but she's in good spirits. The doctor said no stairs for a few days. Eleanor came in. Birdie was in the wingback chair, with a quilt across her knees and a fresh cup of tea on the table beside her. Her left wrist was wrapped in a soft brace. Her cheeks were a little flushed. Her eyes were as alert as ever. The cat was in her lap. Eleanor sat down on the love seat. The little terrier came over and put his head on her shoe. You scared us, Eleanor said. I scared myself. I will not move that quickly again. Birdie's hand moved slowly along the cat's back. Eleanor, I asked Henry to call you because I wanted to tell you something while it was on my mind. I have been 91 for almost a year. There are conversations I have been waiting to have, and I am not waiting anymore. Eleanor folded her hands. All right. This house, Birdie said, will need a person in it after I am gone. Henry will be that person. He told me on Wednesday. He is moving home in June. I want you to know because you are the reason. Eleanor opened her mouth. No, Birdie said. Don't argue with me. The reason is not magic. The reason is that you noticed something, and you brought it to me, and you stayed for the rest of it. That kind of attention is what makes towns. Most people would have edited the cat out of the photograph and moved on. You did not, and because you did not, my grandson is coming home. She looked at the cat. And I want to tell you the other thing. Henry asked me last night why I think Marigold has been at all those weddings. She paused. I told him I had not allowed myself to think too closely about it, because some things lose their shape when you press on them. But he pressed gently, and I told him what I thought. I think Marigold loved being in rooms where people were promising things. He liked the precision of it. He liked the sound of vows, which are the most attentive sentences most people ever say in their lives. He came to my niece's wedding in 1999 because I was there, and he came to all of the weddings I went to, and then... She looked at Eleanor. I think when I stopped going, he kept going for me. He went to the weddings I was too tired or too widowed or too old to attend. He went for both of us, and he watched, on my behalf, the part of the world I had stopped being able to watch in person. She paused again, and then he came back. She looked down at the cat, who had not moved. Maybe because Henry is here. Maybe because the story was ready to close itself. Maybe just because I have stopped needing reasons, Eleanor. I am 91. The reasons are for the young. Eleanor sat with this for a long moment. Birdie, she said, is he going to stay? Birdie smiled. For a little while, dear. Not forever. Cats know when their work is done. He will know. Sunday, May 18th. 6 weeks later. The Doyle wedding had gone well. The May weddings had begun. Henry had flown back to Phoenix for 2 weeks to pack his apartment, and he was coming home, for good, on the 11th of June. Birdie's hip had healed. She was walking again, slowly, with a cane she described as temporary, you understand. This is not a permanent arrangement. Eleanor stopped by on Sunday afternoons now. It had become a habit she had not declared a habit. She brought scones from the bakery on Cherry Street. Birdie made tea. They sat in the parlor, and they did not always talk. The cat was there sometimes. Sometimes he was not. Eleanor had stopped being startled by either possibility. The first Sunday, he had not been there. She had felt it, a quiet absence in the room, the way you feel an empty pew in a church you go to often. And Birdie had said, without looking up from her crossword, "He's out today, dear. He'll be back when he's ready." He was always back by the next Sunday. Eleanor did not photograph him. She had thought about it once, the third Sunday. She had brought her camera. She had set it on the low table. She had looked at the cat sleeping in Birdie's lap with the soft afternoon light falling across him, and she had thought what a beautiful picture it would be. She had not picked up the camera. Some things, she had decided, were not for the lens. Saturday, June 14th. Henry came home for good on a Saturday morning. He drove a small moving truck the 1,100 miles east, and he pulled up in front of the grey house at 9:15 in the morning, and Birdie was waiting on the front porch in her good wool cardigan, even though it was warm, and the lilac in the side yard was in full bloom now, and the air smelled the way late spring smelled in Maple Hollow, green and warm and slightly sweet, with the hum of the first bees in it. Eleanor had agreed to come over and help unload. She arrived at 10. Henry's truck was open. The terrier was on the porch supervising. Birdie was directing traffic from her wingback chair, which they had moved out onto the porch for the occasion. The cat was on the porch railing, sitting upright, paws together, tail curled, looking directly at Henry as he carried in a box of books. Henry walked past him with the box, paused, set the box down, and put one hand briefly on the top of the cat's small head. The cat closed his eyes. Then Henry picked up the box and went inside. Eleanor watched from the truck. It's Sunday, August 10th. Late afternoon. Eleanor was at the studio, finishing edits on a wedding from the previous weekend. Penny was on the radiator in the kitchenette. The window was open, and the late summer air was coming in warm, the way it came in on Sunday afternoons in August in Maple Hollow, with the sound of a lawnmower somewhere 2 streets over and the soft chatter of swallows on the wire. Her phone rang. It was Henry. "Eleanor, can you come over?" She drove to Linden Street. Henry was on the front porch. The little terrier was beside him. The wingback chair was inside through the open front door, and Eleanor could see Birdie in it, asleep, her head turned slightly to the side, her hands folded in her lap. Henry's eyes were red. "She went a little while ago," he said quietly, "in her sleep. She had her tea and her crossword, and she said she was going to close her eyes for a minute. And she did." Eleanor sat down on the porch step. Henry sat down beside her. They did not speak for a long time. The bees were in the lilac, even though it was August, and the lilac had finished blooming long ago, the second blooming, the small one, that some lilacs do in late summer. The light fell across the porch in slow golden bars. After a while, Eleanor said, "Was he there?" at the end. Henry nodded slowly. He was on her lap. He stayed until she was gone. And then he got up, and he walked to the front window, and he sat on the sill and looked out at the lilac for a long time. He paused. "He left through the back screen door about an hour ago. I haven't seen him since." Eleanor put her hand briefly on Henry's arm. "He won't come back," she said. "No, I don't think he will." Saturday, October 18th. The funeral had been in August, small and warm, and full of the people who had known Birdie longest, and it had been the kind of funeral that makes you grateful for the town you are in. Henry had stayed in the grey house. He had taken Birdie's wingback chair and moved it to a different angle, so it caught the afternoon light from the side window, and he had begun to put his own books on the lower shelves of the bookcase, slowly, leaving room for hers above. It was now October. The maples had turned. The town was full of colour in the way it was full of colour every October. The slow burning of the hills, the leaves piling against the stone walls, the wood smoke from the first fires of the season beginning to thread through the evenings. Eleanor was at the barn. She had a wedding that afternoon, the Pruitt wedding. A small ceremony, 60 guests, an early evening reception. The kind of wedding she had photographed 100 times, in this exact venue, in this exact light. She arrived at the barn at 3:30 to set up. The afternoon was clear and warm. The doors of the barn were open. The chandeliers were lit. The chairs were arranged in their 2 long rows facing the aisle, the way they always were, and the late afternoon sun was coming in through the high east window in long golden columns, the way it always did at this hour. She walked the room. She checked her angles. She checked the light. She walked to the back wall, where the folding chairs were, the same chairs that had been in the Hartwell photograph 7 months ago, an entire lifetime ago. She stood there for a moment, and she looked at the empty chair where Marigold had sat that day. The wood was the same. The shadow on it was the same. The light fell on it the same way. The chair was empty. She did not cry. She stood there for a long, slow moment, and she felt the particular full-bodied quiet of a story that had finished. The Pruitt couple were not yet here. The minister was in the side room. The flowers were on the altar. The barn was still and warm and old and entirely itself. Eleanor smiled, small and private. She turned around. She walked back to her camera at the far end of the barn, and she lifted it to her shoulder, and she framed the empty aisle through the viewfinder, and she took the day's first photograph. He had been home for 3 years and 3 months. He had married a woman named Caroline who taught English at the high school. They had moved into the grey house together. The wingback chair was in its new angle. The lilac was older now, and so was the terrier, and so were both of them. They had been married at the barn the previous June. Eleanor had photographed the wedding. She had checked the photographs afterward. Every photograph, every corner, every chair, and the orange cat with the white teardrop had not been in any of them. She had not expected him to be. She had checked anyway. On the porch, 3 years after the wedding, Henry had said one thing about Marigold that Eleanor would carry for the rest of her life. She had asked him whether he ever still saw the cat, whether anyone in the family had seen him anywhere since August. Henry had thought about it for a long time. "No," he said, "but I think about him most when I am photographing somebody happy." October again, 3 years and 7 months after the Hartwell wedding. Eleanor was at her studio on a late Sunday afternoon, going through the last of a folder. Penny was in the window, watching the swallows over the hardware store roof. The folder was an engagement shoot. A young couple from town, both born and raised here, both come back after college. They had asked Eleanor to do their engagement portraits at the lake house at the south end of town, the same lake house Coralie's daughter had been married at in 2011. Eleanor opened the folder. She scrolled through the photographs. The light had been beautiful that day. The couple were easy with each other. The leaves were turning. There was a moment, photograph 112, where the bride-to-be was laughing with her head tipped back and her partner had his hand on her cheek, and the lake behind them was perfectly still, and the late light was on both of their faces. Eleanor zoomed in to check the focus. She zoomed back out. She looked at the background. The fence post at the far edge of the dock was bare. There was no cat on it. She smiled. She closed her laptop and she stood up, and she walked to the west window of the studio, and she stood for a moment, looking out at Main Street in the slow gold of an October afternoon. The sycamore in front of the hardware store had begun to drop its leaves. A neighbor walked by with a small white dog. The light was the way it had been on the Saturday in March, when she had first opened the Hartwell folder, and also entirely different. Penny jumped onto the windowsill beside her. Eleanor put her hand on Penny's back. The cat purred under her palm, warm and ordinary and entirely present. Outside, the leaves were falling slow over the stone wall of the old hardware store. She watched them for a long time.